we got another deck profile for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Aura Prism. This is the deck list that I am far more comfortable with than the Herald version or the hybrid version. If you're interested in seeing the other versions of the deck, though, go ahead and check out the links in the description. So let's just jump right into it and talk about the deck list. So obviously we're playing a lot of auras. We have 9 yellow auras and then all of the blue auras and a little spicy one of over here. We're gonna come back to this. Just put a pin in that thought, all right? And then to utilize this aura plan, obviously we have to use the Iris of Reality. It's pretty much our only option other than Reality Refractor. Other than that, we have enough blues to facilitate this game plan. We are on, I believe, 34 blues here. Yep, 34 blues. Basically, we want to make sure that we're always drawing 1 to 2 blues every round. And the thing that makes it odd is some of our blues we're trying to cast. So that kind of messes up our count of how many blues that we actually want to play in the deck. And we sometimes need to block with them since a lot of our blues are our block 3s. So you kind of want to go pretty high in your blue count. Beyond that, we're playing a package of defensive cards with Fate Foreseen, Oasis, Sink Below, Soul Shield, Brother in Arms. We want to make sure that, we don't die, because we, start with 32 health, and our opponent is going to be trying to race us down since we're playing this aura plan. As well, we need to make sure that we have some number of cards in the deck, like Soul Shield, that cost some amount of money, so that way when we draw these non-block cards, if we need to block with them because they don't play with our hand, we can pitch them in a defensive manner. That is another reason why we play the Footsteps, even though we're not necessarily focusing on a game plan where we even utilize the Phantasm part of the text on this. We have a few efficient attacks in the deck with Miraging Metamorph and some War-Tuned Heralds. The idea here is that we're playing Tunic because we're playing auras. So when we don't need to use the Tunic to play one of our auras, we can use it to just throw a very efficient attack. It's essentially a 0 for 7 when we throw one of these, and these have relevant text. Also, the War Tunes let us grab a Figment from our deck, so that way we can later on gain some life. But also, if we pitch a blue to play one of our War Tunes, we're still floating 2 resources. So if the Herald hits, and we get the Figment, we can then flip the Figment, gaining back 4 life. That's pretty powerful. But even if we don't do that, we still have the Figment in play for later on, so we can basically convert one of our blues that don't block very well into 4 life, and then a 5th life if we have a Footsteps or an Oasis or something like that. One choice that I made was not playing very many Figments. I don't think that you particularly want very many in this version of the deck. It's kind of hard getting them into play. You can technically get them into play with Merciful Retribution if you swing a Herald and it pops, but that's pretty hard to do. You can't do it with Genesis because this is a beginning of turn trigger, and Prism specifies that it has to be during the action phase, so that doesn't work. So it's pretty unrealistic actually getting Figments into play most of the time, so we're not really focused on doing that, but might as well have some in the deck as a rite of activation with our War Tunes. They have to respect the on-hit of this. Pretty crazy. It's a 1 for 7 that on-hit gains us 4 life and a Ponder token. I'll take that. Key equipment choices. Again, we're playing the Tunic. We really want to have that for our yellow auras. They cost 4, so ideally what we're trying to do is set one of these, and then once we hit our Tunic, we pitch a blue to play the yellow aura. Otherwise, the yellow auras are very inefficient to play. It is one of the reasons why I'm not playing more of them. I would be playing more of them in a Luminaris build of like old Luminaris. With Iris, pitching a yellow doesn't really accomplish very much in the deck. So when we draw them, if we're not playing it that turn, they're kind of a brick. So then you have to arsenal them or inefficiently pitch them to something else unless you have an outlet like a Soul Shield or something. Otherwise, you're going to have to go yellow pitch plus something else to swing one of your auras with Iris, and that's just a terrible rate. I think you could get away with playing a few less yellow auras, but I want the opportunity to be able to see them during the game in case my opponent is respecting my auras and killing them, because when your opponent is respecting your auras and just killing them as you play them, the blue auras are very hard to actually get anything going with, because you play it and then pass turn and then your opponent just picks it off and you never get a chance to swing with it. And then for our other equipment, Wave of Reality is insane when we're auras. It just immediately lets us start the game with a Spectral Shield in play, which lets us start with a hammer. Getting that first aura is usually the hardest, so getting something that your opponent has to fight over immediately is pretty important for your gameplay loop. I have Mage Master Boots in the sideboard of the deck. I think in some of your matchups you do want this instead of Footsteps, like a Pauper matchup, because you're pretty much never going to use either side of the text of the Footsteps. So if that's the case, might as well play Mage Masters so you can cheat into play one of your blue auras and have the all-important double aura round. Also nice if you're on a budget, you can just only play the Mage Masters and not use the Footsteps. I don't think they're that important for the deck. It's just, if you have them, you might as well play them. And then I have Crown in the list, as well as Halo. This is something that I actually need to test out more. I'm not sure if I actually want both of these. I think that if I played this list some more, I'd probably end up cutting one of them, and I'm not sure which one. In theory, I really like the Halo because it opens up a really cute play where we can go like, pitch a yellow or a blue, crack our Halo, put a Herald into our Soul, trigger our Prism, getting our Figment of Protection, which will then make a Spectral Shield. Then we can use our 2 floating resources that we still have from pitching a blue to play an Invoke Shariah that we parked in Arsenal a little while ago. And then we pitch another card to swing with our Shariah, getting a lot of value. It's just like a lot of value in one play. We're gaining 4 health effectively, we're swinging for 4. If our opponent lets this damage through, we're also healing, as well as shooting them for 1, gaining 1. It's a lot of value. I think that that's a good reason to potentially play the Halo just so that play's available to you, but you don't necessarily need to do Halo for that. You know, you can make a Special Shield from something else, like from Haze Bending or something, or you play other cards that make Spectrals, like Genesis, Herald of Protection, Prismatic Shield. There's other options, obviously your gloves, but I like the instant access to it because I don't know when I'm going to be drawing my Invoke Shariah, so I want to be able to do that when I draw it. But then Crown is just kind of always good, and something I mentioned in my other video is that I like being able to always get value out of the Ponder token from Erudition. It means that I can just arsenal any random card and not have to worry too much about it, because I can always get bailed out by my Crown. And then of course, you know, Command & Conquer is pretty popular right now, but that's never been a card that's great into auras since we play so many instants, but we are playing a lot of defense reactions, so sometimes we're going to have one of those in Arsenal and they throw a CNC at us, and we have like a 2-block and a non-block, and our hand just like doesn't stop a CNC. Like we have another defense reaction and 1 3-block. We just literally can't block this out, so being able to just yeet that card away and ignore the CNC is pretty important. And then the last couple choices in the main deck I want to talk about. I'm playing Fandale's Fighting Spirit and Celestial Cataclysm. I wanted some number of poppers in the deck. I think you could even go a little higher on the popper count if you wanted to. I originally had Wounded Bull over Oasis Respite, but I found that I had too many offensive reds in the deck where my sideboarding didn't really make sense. I wasn't like actually bringing that in too often, so I ended up cutting that from the deck. You could just make that a yellow popper if you really wanted to, or just ignore that and just not play the extra popper. It's nice having this because, A, you know, we're always going to be at lower life, so this trigger's very relevant. But also, we're playing a very high blue count, so this is just an efficient card to play, and you can't pop it, so it's pretty good into the popper matchups. And then Celestial Cataclysm, this is a mainstay of old Prism, but I think this card got a little bit of extra life in this version of the deck because we're not really utilizing our Soul very much. So when we have a Genesis going for a while, or a Merciful, or we put a Soul Shield into our Soul, or Herald hits, if we're not doing the Figment thing, what are we using our Soul for? So being able to later on in the game have a 0 for 7 in the deck because we're valuing our Soul at 0 most of the time, that's pretty nice. It's just a high value card that's also a popper if we need that against Dromai or the Mirror. I will say it is an issue that is a yellow. I would like to beat this into your head that yellows, unlike old Prism, are awful in this deck. We are not playing that many things that actually play off of 2 resources. It's pretty much just our couple Heralds in the deck and Soul Shield. So yellow really doesn't do much. So when we have a yellow, the best thing we can do is pitch that with something else to either push an aura when we're attacking with our Iris, or pitch it with something else to play a yellow aura. It's not very efficient. We're not trying to do that. So shaving yellows from the deck is good, but the Floors is a block 3 that could be a 0 for 7. And I think that's a good ceiling on the card and a good floor on the card, but definitely could cut this from the deck if you want to replace this with like a blue or another attacking red. I definitely wanted to have some blocking value at pitch though, so I think that this is either a yellow or a blue for me for how I have the deck currently structured. And then the other one I'm going to mention, kind of similar thought, we're not really utilizing our soul. So I really like this as a one-off potentially in the deck. I have not tried this yet. I will tell you that. So no psyops here. I'm not trying to convince you guys this card is insane, but this is something that I thought in theory could be really good in the deck. If we're valuing soul at 0, this could be nuts later on in the game. And this helps solve some of the problems that we have in the deck of dealing with small attacks like 1/1/1/1/1. A lot of people pointed this out in my last video, but I don't think this is as good in that build because we are actually trying to do the Figment thing. But in this build, we're not. So this could very easily be like a 0 for 8 that we play at the end of the game that ends up stopping some breakpoints and is just like really annoying for our opponent to deal with, where they thought they thought we were at 5 life, and then we play this card and they're like, oh no, now this game's gonna get dragged out way longer because they just played this super life gain card. One thing to note though is it is a light instant aura, not a light illusionist. So pretty much I think all of the illusionist weapons specify it has to be an illusionist aura for you to attack with. So this does not work with it. You cannot attack with this. You're just playing this as a life gain spell, but it does work with Merciful. Win an aura or attack action card. So it is an aura. It does not care what type of aura it is. So this works with even a Ponder token. It doesn't care. It's just you have an aura and it's destroyed, you take 1. Which can be really cute against something like Lexi when they're giving you like a Frailty token or something and you're like, I don't care about this. I just blocked my whole hand anyways. You take 1 now. And since it is a light card, it would go into our soul. Not super relevant if we're playing this because we don't value our soul very highly. But you never know, if we get some more soul later and we still have a Celestial in the deck, maybe that comes up, but probably not. But that is worth noting. And then before moving on to some other card choices that you can make with the deck of things that I think are worth considering, just want to mention something quick on the blues. You could very easily change these blues around. It's not very important what most of these are other than the blue auras. Obviously, you got to play those. Brothers in Arms, I like that. You're wasting resources when you pitch a yellow and a blue to play a yellow aura sometimes, so being able to use that resource to block for 4, that's nice. Heart, it's nice to have. Don't need it. Warmongers, we're in a meta that this is pretty good. Probably want to play it while it's still legal. Probably should ban this LSS. And then I just have like some other blues in the deck that are relevant if we're on an aura plan. These could very easily just be heralds instead, so you have a higher density of light cards for Genesis. That's a choice you can make. Its preference. It's not a hugely important decision there. Now, for some other cards that we're not playing that I think are worth mentioning that you could consider playing in the deck, you could definitely put in some more defensive cards like Flicker Trick or Sigil. This is like a tuning for the metagame type of thing and what matchups that you're trying to target. Like, oh, Lexi and Katsu are really good right now. Maybe I want Flicker Trick because this is pretty good in those matchups. Oh, I'm in meta that they can't really pressure my life total and I have a chance to fatigue them, and there's off turns where they're dealing with auras. Maybe I want to play Sigil to give myself a life buffer. And then maybe you don't want to be playing these poppers. Maybe you just want some more big punchy attacks or maybe a few less defense reactions. There's some other good attack action cards that we could play. Red Protection is insanely powerful in the deck. I think that this is one of the best red attacks you could play in the deck. I think it is better than Fighting Spirit. But the whole point of the deck is I'm trying to play this into popper matchups, and I want to have some number of poppers in the deck. Now, if you're going to not care about that and just say poppers aren't real, I'm just going to sack Dromai, then yeah, you could easily swap this in for the Fighting Spirit or potentially the Celestial Cataclysm. And the same goes for Haze. Like, this kind of hits both sides of if it gets popped, I still get something out of it. I don't really like this card, though. I've seen other people play this in, like, Iris Dromai. I don't really like that. I think I'd rather just play a card that doesn't get popped, or if I'm going to play it, it's because I don't think it's getting popped, like Protection. You know, they didn't have the option of playing these in Iris Dromai. And then Phantasmaclasm is just number on card. It's 3 points above rate. It's a good card. You could definitely play some more Figments in the deck as well. Again, I'm not really focusing on that kind of game plan. I think you could convince me to play maybe one more. Rebirth I would like to mention specifically because there is a cute thing you can do with it. Rebirth, specifically the other side, does not specify what kind of card you get from your graveyard. It's just a yellow card. Not attack action, not Phantasm, just says yellow card. What you can do with this is grab something like an Arclight Sentinel. That's not a card you're supposed to be able to recur. And against some decks, you can put them in an infinite loop of Arclights, depending on how much soul you have, where every turn you put the Arclight back on top of your deck and put it into play and then pass turn. Pretty hard to set up. I think this is some magical Christmas land stuff. It's worth at least considering in the deck. If you can set that up, a lot of decks can't break out of it unless they have a way to gain an action point, and people just aren't really packing those kind of cards anymore now that Prism isn't in the meta. Another key piece to that combo is having a Genesis in play so you can guarantee having soul every turn, and you can just essentially keep this around for the rest of the game for as long as you have cards in deck. I mentioned before that I didn't want to overload the deck with too many of the auras and such, but you could, consider swapping some of them or playing more of them, like Ode and Prismatic. Those are very powerful cards. I think Ode is good when you're playing more of the Herald style, because you have things just throw with it and they'll get go again. And in this build, I'm not making lots of tiny attacks, so the on-hit lose 1 loses a bit of the value, but it's still a very good card, and you could definitely convince me that that should be in the deck over something else like potentially Genesis or Merciful or something like that. I'm not, married to any of these, so that could definitely slot back in, as well as Prismatic. This is definitely good in some matchups. My main thing with this is we already have a lot of reds in the deck, so I don't want to up my red count even more. Even more War Tunes. This card's nuts. Like I said, the play patterns this card can have in the deck are very good, so just getting value off of our 1-cost Illusionist attacks is really good. You know what else goes with more War Tunes? Even more War Tunes! Obviously, this is the worst of them, as this doesn't really have relevant text in the deck, but it is a number on a card that we can throw at our opponent if we just want to play just max copies of 1-cost Illusionist attacks that push good value. You could consider playing Ironhide Gauntlet over the Wave of Reality, because, like I mentioned before, it's about finding ways to use our resources on our opponent's round when we do inefficient things like pitching a yellow. So being able to pitch a yellow to block for 3 still effectively with our Footsteps plus Ironhide, that can be pretty useful, but I think the Wave is so high value in the deck that you just have to play this card, but it's worth mentioning at least. And then lastly, Reality Refractor. I think you could have this in your sideboard where you potentially play both of them. Against some of the matchups that it's really hard getting multiple auras into play, you just play the Reality Refractor instead, because you're just never getting multiple auras in play, so the go again doesn't matter. So might as well make the 1 aura that you have count for more. It also does fit your cost curve a bit better with the yellows. Like I keep saying, yellows are pretty bad. A yellow covers this, and also what you can do is pitch 2 blues to play a yellow aura, and then you still have 2 floating to swing the yellow aura. But I think the go again is important enough to have in a lot of the matchups that you're doing the aura thing into, so I think you still have to play the Iris, but it's potentially you could have both, if you find the slots. Again, if you're looking for the deck list, it will be in the description below, as well as the other deck profiles for Prism that I made so far and my thoughts on her. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. It really helps the channel. I also have a Patreon if you would like to join that. It really helps create more content like this. And as always, thank you so much for watching.